Pain is a choice. Well, these words, this phrase, this wisdom, I would say, is something that took a lot of effort, a lot of time to learn, a lot of experience too, and it was something I didn't expect to learn, something I wasn't seeking, not by any measure, but it was something I came across nonetheless, something that was in my life, or something that I had to come across, that I had to experience, something that I had to learn, and maybe I can teach it without you having to go through the experience, I would say. Pain is a choice. I'd say for the most part, this all started back when I first got to grade 8 4. This was like a new stage in my development. I was turning into, well, I was a teenager, a new teenager, because I don't think the 13 kind of counts as that, as the transition. 14 is more the stage where you truly become a teenager and can fully embrace what that brings and what that means for you as a child transitioning into an adult, I would say, but we kind of like have this transition phase called the teenage years where you kind of get to try out adulthood. It's like the free trial before the actual adulting starts. And I got into this stage and to this phase. I'd say I was a very troubled kid. Troubled kid. I had a lot on my mind. I thought a lot, and yeah, there were things I felt, a lot of things that maybe I was too young to feel. Saw a lot of things that I was too young to see, and maybe there were some things that I didn't want to feel and I didn't want to remember or to see anymore. And throughout this year, throughout my grade 8 year, I kind of like came to the conclusion that maybe it would be best if I could just skip time and fast forward my life into a better time in whatever way that would be possible. That maybe I didn't have to go through these years, these coming years, or this phase in my life, that I wouldn't have to feel, I wouldn't have to think, remember, experience this part of my life. And I thought that that would be beneficial, that that would be a good thing for me at least. And this wasn't like a passing fancy or some random dream that I had. This was something I gave a lot of thought to, a lot of time that I spent thinking about it, contemplating it, planning it out, and kind of jotting down the best possible way that I could do this, that I could perform this time skip in a way and skip these years to a time maybe I thought was more worthwhile, more enjoyable, I would say. And I came to the rationalization that maybe I couldn't time travel, but I could give myself the illusion of it, the illusion of a time skip. And I had to sit down and think that what exactly makes up time. what do I count? What matters in my life, in the life that I had lived in these short 14 years that I was alive? And it was the times where maybe I'd felt the most emotion, maybe the most negative emotion, when I was the saddest, when I felt hated, and maybe when I was angry. That these were moments, these were experiences that I remembered vividly. And on the opposite side, I also remember the times I was happiest, the times I was most satisfied, when I felt the most loved. That these two different times on two opposite ends of the spectrum, that these memories, these emotions were what created these memories. But I gave it a little bit more thought, and maybe it wasn't the emotions themselves, but the contrast between the two. For you can feel a lot of negative emotion all the time, and maybe that you'd stop making memories, you wouldn't remember much, even though the emotions were high, and you could be happy all the time, I would say. Continually on a high, and even then, I don't think you would form these memories, these experiences that you remember. So I kind of figured that it wasn't the extremes or these high emotions that I had to stop in order to stop my memory. It was the contrast between the two, this fluctuation, this up and down. That if I could stop this fluctuation, then maybe I would stop my memory. And in stopping my memory, I could give myself the illusion of skipping time. Because I figured that if I did not remember, then I wasn't really there. And that's what I did. That's what I planned out. In order to accomplish this, I had to get rid of the negative emotions, all of the things that maybe made me feel hated, things that made me feel sad, that made me feel angry or unsatisfied. I had to mitigate whatever those factors were or whoever those people were, and in some places completely remove them from my life. But it wasn't just the negative emotions that I had to remove, it was the positive emotions as well. Whatever happiness, whatever laughter, whatever love, whatever satisfaction, or whatever things that made me feel contempt also had to be mitigated or removed in order to achieve the state of little to no fluctuation between any positive or negative emotions. And that's what I did. I cut off a lot of friends, I cut off games, fun activities, going out, events, whatever I thought would hinder this process, this experiment, this goal of mine to perform a time skip. But this wasn't enough because in a day there was a lot of variability, I would say. And within this variability, there would maybe be a chance that some event would happen that would spark some high emotion that would maybe cause a memory to be formed. So, in order to truly make it work, I also had to instill a routine to discipline myself in a way and follow this routine to the T. A routine that was the same each and every single day, a routine that never changed, a routine that mitigated anything fun and anything particularly horrible. So I planned out this routine. I would just go to school, sit in class, not necessarily talk to anyone or do anything exciting. Go to break, have my lunch, and go to sports, and go home. And at home, I wouldn't do anything fun there either. I mostly stayed in my room and just slept or sat. And in my mind, this would work. That maybe this would help me bring help me come closer to my goal, to my vision, to my time skip. For the first couple of weeks, I followed. I disciplined myself. I got into the minutiae of things, into the routine, into the daily life, the daily repetitiveness. And as months passed, I realized that maybe I couldn't sit alone for so many hours, for so long, because it just looked weird. It looked suspicious in a way. So I decided that I'd make friends with a group, a group that maybe wasn't particularly interested in me, and one I wasn't particularly interested in. A group that wouldn't ask me too many questions. One where I didn't particularly fit in, but one that would let me stay in a way. And in this group, I chose a group of colored kids, colored boys, for they wouldn't ask me much because I wasn't a part of their culture, I wasn't a part of their traditions, I wasn't one of their people. So if I'd missed a joke, missed a reference, missed whatever social cue, social interaction, that maybe it wouldn't be that bad. It wouldn't raise too many eyebrows, and I could just flow past it because, well, I wasn't a part of their people. They wouldn't expect me to know. They wouldn't expect me to integrate too deeply into the group. And it worked out quite well, actually. That's exactly how it went. At break, I would go to them, sit next to them, take out my lunch and eat. And I would mostly listen. And if I wasn't listening, I'd take out my earphones and listen to music. And that was enough. That was enough. I was kind of like that person that was there, but not really, in a way. And as the months passed, as I followed this routine, the days kind of blended into one another in a way. Because I wouldn't remember anything in particular, because all the days were basically the same. So I'd only remember one day within a week. And as more and more time passed, within a month, I'd maybe only remember a week. Maybe in that week there was some event at school or something that was maybe particularly memorable. But mostly I would just remember that single repetitive day out of all the weeks. And as more and more time passed, the months started blending in. I couldn't differentiate between one month and another, or what had made the past 3 months any different from the current month. And after this stage, I stopped remembering anything at all. Because it's weird in a way to succeed in this goal. Because when you are successful, you do not know that you are because you do not remember anything. You have no contrast in a way. There is no difference because you have basically killed any difference within your life. You have removed any contrast. And in that, kind of like removed yourself in a way, removed your being, what you would probably constitute as a self, what you think of when you contemplate being alive. And I existed in this state for about 2 years before I achieved this stasis, this state of limbo, about at the end of grade 8, in the entirety of grade 9 and grade 10. I was in this routine, in this forgetfulness. It wasn't really forgetting, it was just not making any memories. There was nothing to remember, which means there was nothing to forget. There was just nothing there. I felt no emotions. I made no memories. I felt no happiness, no sadness, no anger, no pain, no love, no satisfaction. Until one day, about the end of grade 10, it was around the end of the year in December, and I was at home sitting on the fence outside, not doing anything in particular, just looking at the sky, when I saw my father kind of like coming down the street towards the house, walking in an excited state, in a determined state. He walked like a man on a mission, a man with a goal, a man out to accomplish something. And in his left hand, he dragged an axe, which kind of like made a path on the sand on the street. I continued to sit and watch him through the corner of my eye as I stared at the sky. He came closer, walked past me and into the house. And at home, there was kind of like a gathering. My family was there, and there was sort of braai that was happening. Celebration, I would say. And as he walked in, I heard commotion, a lot of shuffling, a lot of screaming. But I was not fazed. I felt nothing. I continued to look at the sky. The commotion grew louder and louder and louder. There was a lot more shuffling, a lot more movement. And I remember there was someone else standing next to me. And he tapped me on my leg and he asked me, he was like, why are you just sitting there? Like your father literally just walked into the house with an axe, trying to slash and cut. And I remember this very vividly because it wasn't the traumatic experience happening behind me that kind of like pulled me out of my state of limbo, out of my state of forgetfulness. It was my realization of what I had turned myself into, of what I had become. This robot, I would say, a shell of a human being, not really alive, almost a zombie, I would say. And right there in that moment, I didn't remember anything. And I knew that I didn't remember, but what I did feel was the nothingness of the past couple of years. And I felt that nothing that had filled all that time. And that nothing hurt more than pain itself. And I kind of promised myself that I would try. I would try to feel again. And all the other emotions were kind of elusive. I didn't know how to feel happy. I didn't know how to maybe feel satisfied or what it would take, what actions I would need to do in order to feel contempt. But maybe I could feel pain. Because pain is more concrete. Pain is more tangible. It's reproducible. It's more reliable, I would say. It was an emotion that I could rely on, an emotion that maybe I could feel again. Not in the physical sense, not on my body, but inside. Maybe on my heart, in my heart. Then maybe if I could feel pain, then maybe I could feel other things as well. Maybe there was a goal to strive for. There was something that could bring me out of this state that I was in. This nothingness, this death that I brought upon myself. From then on, I strived to feel this pain. And it took some time. Because in a sense, you don't really try to count the days when you're trying to recover from something. You just keep trying and trying over and over again, and then you have this hope that maybe someday it'll pay off. You don't know when, and you don't really care when it will happen. You have no anticipation. But you just hope that if I continue trying, that someday it'll work out, that someday I will feel something, that I will feel this pain that I'm striving towards. And it took 2 years. The entirety of grade 11 went past, and the entirety of grade 12 too. And I remember the day vividly. I was studying for my applied mathematics exam. It was right the night before. I was sitting on my desk in my room listening to music when finally, after a very, very long time, I felt my heart break for the first time in many, many years. And tears streamed down my face. It was kind of weird emotion to feel because I was sad, I was distraught, I was heartbroken, but I was also happy. I was overjoyed that I could feel this pain, that my heart could break, that I could feel again. It was a kind of weird emotion to feel, kind of like sadness and happiness at the same time. To be distraught and joyous and joyful. But that is a memory that I'll forever have, a memory that I'll forever cherish as the first step of me breaking out, of me being alive again. Because that was the day I was basically reborn from the death that I had imposed on myself. And from that, I learned that numbing myself was worse than feeling the pain of my life, the pain of any struggles that I might have gone through or would go through in my life. That choosing to not feel anything at all was worse than whatever I would happen to be going through at that particular time. That choosing to numb myself with drugs, maybe alcohol, video games, women, whatever pleasure may be, whatever numbing factor was not worthwhile. And most especially, choosing to not feel anything at all was a state worse than death. For in a sense, I feared pain more than I feared death. This was a distortion. This was something that I learned the hard way. That pain was nothing to be feared. Pain was something that I would come to choose. Pain was something that I'd have to choose consistently over a long period of time, and maybe something that I would come to feel happy to feel. And in this time, just like people that numb themselves with, let's say, drugs or alcohol, there's a change that appears on your face in a way. For with alcohol, people's faces kind of like drop. They get something that in our culture we call a puza face, which is the kind of stereotypical face that someone that drinks a lot of alcohol gets. A face that is usually seen on alcoholics. And you can see the same kind of like deterioration on people that abuse drugs, I would say. people that use hard drugs, your physical appearance deteriorates, and you can kind of like spot what kind of drugs they are using by the facial manifestations that the drug produces on their faces. And the same is true with a man that feels nothing at all. For I think I developed kind of rings around my eyes, and there was this stare that I acquired, one that many call the 1,000 yard stare, which is kind of like a stare that men that come back from war have after they have seen and inflicted death from 1,000 yards away. It's a kind of glassy look, a kind of like death in a way. That when you look deep into their eyes, that there's nothing there. There's nothing looking back, I would say. It is kind of like the same stare that women that have a lot of sexual partners get. That after a lot of these partners, after being intimate with a large number of men, that their soul dies in a way. They lose their sense of self, their sense of being, their personhood. And when you stare into their eyes, nothing stares back. There's no one there. They also develop these rings around their eyes, rings that you cannot really see, but you can feel. You can sense them intuitively, subconsciously. And this was something that the people around me sensed. For I would get teased about my eyes, about this stare, about this expression that I had on my face. And kind of like back then, or within the state, I didn't really understand what they were talking about or what really they were referring to. Alright. Morning. Because I was the one in this state, I couldn't see myself. And even if I could, I couldn't remember what I was, what I had become. A man has a very important relationship with his emotions. Now, I would say that a man's ability to control his emotions is what makes him a man. To put his emotions aside and think rationally and take rational actions, no matter what he may be feeling, no matter what other people around him may be feeling. And most importantly, what a man does with his pain, more often than not, defines the man that he is. And I think this was best showcased on the mountain. For I live in South Africa and I'm closer, so when men or when boys come of age, they have to go through a coming of age ceremony or ritual, I would say, where they go and live on a mountain, isolated from the general society for a period of about 3 weeks, where they're circumcised and have to heal from that. And it's kind of like a hero's journey in a way, or a playing out of that role. And when they come back, they are treated differently in society. They're given more privileges, I would say. And from that, more responsibility is placed upon them, more is expected from them. For they are no longer a boy, they are no longer a child, and they are expected to act as such. Well, I didn't grow up in the Eastern Cape or surrounded by many closer people, so I kind of like didn't get all the hype that maybe most of the young boys get when they played with all the other boys. For my friends were of different cultures, different traditions. They didn't particularly know what the mountain was, what it was about, and they didn't particularly care. So neither did I until this time, which surprisingly enough came right at the end of grade 12, right after I had finally felt something, right after I had achieved my goal to feel this pain. And when you go to the mountain, you are kind of like circumcised with no painkillers, no anesthesia, nothing to numb you from the pain of the procedure. And from there, I think what they were trying to capture is kind of like create a controlled environment where you can feel an immense amount of pain. And in a sense, you are given this playground, this control, this domain in order to do what you can with this pain, to do with it as you must. And I think the general idea is to use the pain to transform yourself. For pain is a very powerful transformative agent and can be used to really change your being, change your personhood, change your personality, change your identity, change who you are. And on the mountain, you are given this kind of like bundle of pain to do what you can with it, to achieve whatever state you might want to achieve, to turn yourself into whatever person you might want to be. And in a sense, this is the most pain that most of the men feel in their lives, and probably the only time in their lives where they are ever put in a controlled environment to feel this amount of pain, to transform themselves in such a short period of time. I think it's a kind of misconception that young boys go to the mountain to kind of like learn from the older men. For most of the men, they are quiet. For I think only intuitively that they know that whatever knowledge, whatever wisdom that they have to share doesn't beat the knowledge and the wisdom that these initiates can get from the pain that they feel, from manipulating and transforming this pain, using it to transform themselves. And obviously, at first, I didn't understand this truth. I didn't know what this ritual, what this ceremony was for. And it took some time. It took some time, but after some time, sitting there with my pain, something happened. For the first time ever in my life, I kind of like reached spiritual ascension in a way, a deep spiritual transformation right there on the mountain. For I was kind of like sitting back and just contemplating, meditating, and thinking about the pain that I was in. And I kind of like left my body in a way, what most would call astral projection. I left my body and I could see myself sitting, but I could move, I could kind of like shift away from myself. And above me appeared this white light, this engulfing light, a light that I went to, a light that I embraced fully. And after the light embraced me, I kind of like snapped back into my body, snapped back into where I was. And in some real way, it felt like no time had passed at all. For I was still sitting, still awake, my eyes still wide open in the exact position I was in before I had left. But I was different. I was not the same person that I was before I had embraced the light, before the light had embraced me. In some sense, I could feel more. I had a deeper understanding of my body. I had acquired knowledge without study, without any experimentation, without any experience. And in a way, I felt more content with my life. I felt more content with my being, with where I was, who I was, and I could embrace the pain more fully with my entire being. For now I knew, now I understood, now I had this wisdom that this pain that I was feeling was only energy. Energy that in the coming days I sat on and meditated on. Energy that I learned to move, to manipulate. That I could move this pain to different parts of my body, regardless of where the source was. And in some way, the best place to place the pain was upon my heart. For in some weird way, men and women are built differently. Our mass is focused in different places on our body. For a man, most of his mass, most of his strength, most of his sense of being comes from the width of his chest, how pronounced it is. Kind of like its structure defines the man and tells a lot about who he is, what he feels inside, who he thinks he is, how he walks. And for a woman, most of her being, most of her sense of self, most of her mass is kind of like placed on her lower region, around her waist. And that more often than not defines her experience in this world, her experience in this life. how people interact with her, how she views herself. And in this energy that I took to this chakra point, that was kind of more pivotal, more important to me as a man. That is where I fed this energy, I fed this power that came from this pain that I felt. I took it all to my heart, and in some weird way, from this pain, I extracted large amounts of joy, large amounts of happiness, large amounts of being content with my life, with my being, with my place in this world, with who I was. And I would say that the time I spent on the mountain was the happiest time of my life. It was the happiest I had ever been from before all the 18 years that I had lived, and all the years that I have lived since then. I have yet to experience a greater joy, a greater moment of clarity, a greater moment of happiness, of fulfillment, of being content, of satisfaction. It is a time I think of fondly, a time I sometimes find myself missing. For there I understood that pain was a choice, and to be a man, you'd have to make that choice consistently, make that choice often, and always choose pain above all else, above any other emotion you might feel, be it anger, be it happiness, pleasure, be it love, being content and satisfied. That if you were given a choice and pain was on the table, that you would pick the pain. And there was another important thing that I noticed on the mountain, that most of the time only men were allowed there, and we'd sometimes get visit from the older men, the men of the community, fathers way into their old age. And they'd come and they'd observe, wish us well, wish us good blessings, and make their way back to their homes. And in some sense, when I think about it now, I think what the ritual kind of like tries to encapsulate is that pain is the most defining factor of a man, and how a man chooses to handle pain, how a man chooses to deal with himself, with the people around him, when he is in immense pain, when he is under this immense stressor, more often than not defines the man he is and defines his fitness and his competence, and is often a great predictor of success in his future, in his life, and within relations with the people around him. And I would think that maybe back in the day, when arranged marriages occurred frequently, that these fathers that went to the mountain would not only be there to see, to regulate the practice, to regulate ritual. They would also be there to scout for potential future partners for their daughters. That should some man one day appear at their gate proposing to marry their daughter, they would remember them as a young man on the mountain and how they had fared, how they had dealt with that difficult situation. And in some sense, they would always have a complete, true, and reliable image of that man's fitness, for they would have stored it when they went on their visit to the mountain. And I think back in the day, traditionally, it was the woman's family that chose the husband for the woman. And in some sense, the father would make sure to raise a suitable wife within his daughter in order to make a rich proposal to whichever man he had scouted, whichever man he had seen fit on his visits to the mountain. And maybe this would secure a safe future for his daughter, a safe, prosperous future with a fit man. Maybe that would be a good thing. For as a man, pain is your life source. It is not something to be sedated, something to be nerfed, to be drugged out. It is something to be embraced fully, with all your being, with who you are. To know yourself in this pain, in this state, in this time, is something you strive for. I think it is something that brings you closer to God. It is something that can help you ascend spiritually, maybe way quicker than any other methods. Your pain is your life. You should use your pain as a tool to transform the world, to mold it, to shape it into what you deem fit, into what you need, what your family may need. So, what's the point of remembering pain? For you are your memory. You are what you remember. You are the contrast in your life. You are the fluctuation between good and bad, between happiness and sadness. And most importantly, whatever happiness you may achieve is more often than not defined by the pain you have felt. For there is no glory in the persecution of a good man if all he is good. For this man must be capable of immense evil in order for the persecution of his goodness to be a tragic event, in order to bring validity to it. And in this good and bad, in this contrast, in this pain that you feel, the more you contemplate and meditate on it, the more you will come closer to God. And in some sense, it would stop being a matter of belief, a matter of faith. For in this pain, you would come to knowledge, in this memory, in remembering this pain. you would come to know more and more. And as you know more about the world, as you know more about what surrounds us, you would maybe come to know more about yourself, and you would know more about God and who God is. For I think knowledge is more on the realm of God than belief. So, in that state, after the ritual, after the experience, a lot more happened, but in some subconscious, intuitive, fundamental way, then I wouldn't dare say that I believed in God, but there was something deep within me, something that drove me, that compelled me to kneel before Him either way.